the Boundless Authenticity Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast. If you're new here, just fucking smash that subscribe button so you don't have to miss an episode. Today's guest is the former gate kid turned spiritual explorer, intuitive guide, and devoted truth seeker. On her show Statements by Alex on YouTube, Alex uncovers the hidden connections woven through the gate program, Monarch programming, Hollywood conditioning, alien disclosure, and modern mind control. Her mission is to strengthen intuition and discernment for every listener. Each episode blends grounded research with spiritual insight, astrology, human design, and remote viewing, and other things to help activate higher awareness and inner clarity. Alex, what's happening?
Oh, not much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to get into this with you and honored to be on your show.
Yeah, we got rammed pretty hard by Mercury retrograde, or I should say I did.
No, you're not the only one. That's why I was like, I better double check this morning because Mercury retrograde is definitely a real thing.
Yeah, the weirdest thing is I just had a guest in Arizona and they were 3 hours different.
Yeah, I think, I think daylight savings, I don't know if we change or not. And I wonder if different parts of Arizona, like the southern and the northern parts of Arizona might have different time zones. I'm not super sure on that, but could be it.
I feel like a Muppet. May not know. I don't know. Like, anyway.
It's okay. I don't know. I have to Google it all the time, especially when I'm like releasing shows. I'm like, okay, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. And then I like looked it up once and then it was a different Eastern Standard Time. Like there's 2 Eastern Standard Time. So you're not alone. So no worries.
Let's start at probably the most important question. What is one belief that you had to unlearn in order to see that there were hidden mechanisms of control everywhere?
Oh, man. I'm not so sure. Well, I guess it all stems down to the belief that I'm creating all of this. Like I am in charge of my own reality, whether that is because I am God and everything else outside of me is also God. And it's like God experiencing itself or the universe experiencing itself, or if we live in a simulation, or if it just comes down to belief, like I'm creating all this because I always have the choice. Am I going to see something in a more uplifting, positive way? Am I going to tell a more uplifting story about whatever my circumstances are? Or am I going to be a victim, which I used to be? And I think a lot of people kind of grow up naturally, maybe more so with the victim mentality. Like it's something that is ingrained in a lot of us. And I remember somebody told me once, we're as humans wired to look for worst case scenario, what can go wrong. So once I unlearned that and started to say, well, what could go right? Things really changed for me.
Tell me about your experience in the music industry. What I thought was really interesting is that like randomly YouTube was like, hey, you might like this. And I'm like, come on, YouTube, I don't watch anything. But then my mouse hovered over the little thumbnail and it started playing and I was like, huh. and I started listening to what you were saying. And I think it's because I was talking with somebody about the GATE program that week. And I don't know, it was just interesting because we have a lot in common, which is really weird because I usually run away when people are like, hey, we have a lot in common. I'm like, okay, no, we don't, bye. That's how the handlers get you. And so,
oh my God, tell me about it.
Yeah, so we were both in Nashville around the same time trying to do the same thing, songwriting.
Wow.
And stuff like that.
That's so wild.
Yeah. But in the year 2014, I think stuff started to culminate in a pretty dark way. And it was coming for a long time. You could walk through the streets at night, you feel like something dark is brewing. And there was a lot of chitter chatter and stuff about like how much drugs and stuff was going on in between especially like all the famous people that have their joints set up to embezzle their funds and stuff. You go to the songwriters circles. I don't know if you've ever been to any, but you go to them and you see like big name artists are just hanging out waiting to steal other people's work and stuff like that. And like, so this is how it all works. So like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes on there. How did you cope with all that?
Well, to be honest with you, I only lasted in Nashville for about a month. And back then I think I had left a bad situation in Arizona, and then it was I had a friend living out in Nashville. And then what I find interesting about Nashville is that when you're a musician, and if you ever have had that idea or that desire to be famous or like be a musician or whatever the purpose driving that is, I always glamorized Nashville in my mind. But then I remember I got out there and I was only there for a good month. And the reality of living out there, I lived like 30 minutes from the city. And I just realized it was like a whole, well, not only would I have had to have like 3 jobs to make it work. And I'm like, I'm not falling for that bullshit because I won't be able to like enjoy my life. And I think hats off to the people that can do that. But I just have never been mentally healthy when I'm working. Except right now, I do work a lot on my YouTube channel, but it's enjoyable work. And there's such a difference between enjoyable work that you are so excited to do every day that you're like, I can work 16 hours a day like an Energizer bunny, versus I'm working in a restaurant and I'm like sweating and I'm getting paid minimum wage and my boss is a kind of a dick. And then I don't have any time to enjoy the fruits of my labor. And for me back then, I didn't have any coping mechanism. So I would come home and drink. And honestly, I think my culmination in Nashville was like one night I was like, it was when I started having like flashbacks of some memories that happened in childhood. And I remember trying to share it with my mom and my sister. And I drank like a whole bottle of whiskey and smoked like an entire pack of cigarettes that night. And then that morning after, because I hit my head on a bathroom wall, I was like, okay, this is not sustainable. And I realized that I was always chasing some kind of external dream. So it didn't matter if I was in Nashville or Arizona or wherever I was. If I'm not okay on the inside, everything else on the outside is just a lofty dream. And I did have a really cool experience there, though. When I worked at the pub in the newer part of Nashville when they were kind of redoing one of their downtown parts. And I think I saw some cast members from the show Nashville, which was cool. But that's about that. And then I met some other industry people when I was there. And I remember that year was like right before I got sober. So I would like observe their habits and just see like, man, all these people do is like drink and socialize. And it's like hard to emotionally connect with anyone. And even as much as I was drinking and like had a lot of dark stuff I hadn't worked through, I was still always very like, I want to have not superficial, the opposite of superficial conversations. And I was just surrounded by all these music industry people like trying to get ahead, trying to pursue fame. And then it was all just so superficial because we're just kind of like getting a drink. And then you start to see the corruption, how it's not about the music necessarily. It's like, who are you? Who do you know? How much money do you have to pay to play, etc.
Absolutely. 100%. I learned in Nashville not to meet your heroes because I met a lot of them and they were not very nice at all. Yeah.
I honestly kind of realized I had more experiences with meeting more, I don't know, I would say I don't know if I've ever met like a super A-list, like way famous celebrity, but I met a lot of like B or C or D-listers, people who have had like their moments in the spotlight. And just even putting a foot inside that world, you see that a lot of these people who do have more fame tend to be more of an asshole or like more miserable on the inside. And yeah, just you see a lot of that corruption. And it's like, well, I understand why on some level, because you're competing with a bunch of other, for lack of better words, people who may have narcissistic, like lofty dreams. Like I had to get real and honest with myself when I was in that industry and kind of pursuing fame. It's like, well, why do I want to be famous? And back then a lot of it had to do with trauma conditioning because I needed validation from other people. So I kind of recognize and see that in a lot of people nowadays, especially in the comedy world. That's my most recent brush with the entertainment industry. And you just see like how mean and awful people are to each other. And then just the kind of, Me Too type movement stuff that goes on. And it seems like it's rare. It seems rare to find other genuine people who are like really doing it because they believe in what they're doing it. And they're not just with that attitude of like, I'll do anything to be famous, even if I have to sell myself.
I hear that. I mean, I kind of spent a lot of time as a kid in New York. So I knew New York wasn't where I wanted to be. And I left Nashville, went to LA. I was like, oh, hell no. I went back to Nashville and I was like, why did I come back here? So I actually decided to just go where they were playing a lot of the music that I was into, like hard rock and, like the new metal scene, Breaking Benjamin, Motionless in White, those kinds of bands and stuff like that. So I went to Pennsylvania thinking, okay, well, they got started here. I'm just going to go learn from them. But Motionless in White are nice guys, I guess. But didn't learn much except how to be really nice and benevolent towards your fans. That's one thing I can say about them. The singer is actually really, really a nice, genuinely sweet person, cares about people. But I also think that they sold out too. And there's a lot of people that they're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to bend over. Just let me just take it and get ahead. And in Nashville, what I realized was the same as you, because I started to notice that there were people from famous bands, and how should I put this? They were hobnobbing with each other. You had to get close to their manager if you really wanted to get any kind of semblance of a connection. Not that they would actually call you or anything, but a lot of them there were also pimping their kids out as well. Like their kids wanted to be musicians and stuff. And I saw that. I was like, this is weird.
Oh,
I'm out,
No kidding.
And I was still in the middle of a spiritual awakening too. Nashville kind of fostered my spiritual awakening because you get there and you meet a lot of people that are into like the universe and stuff like that, right? Whereas here in Barbados, where I'm from, it ain't like that. There's no rock and roll scene here, and everything's like super Jesus-y, and like you're gonna die if you don't believe in Jesus. Everything that's not calypso music somehow is satanic, and I really actually don't think that calypso music is Jesus-y. Like there's a lot of darkness in that too. So, there was a lot of moments that I started to realize, okay, there's so much odd stuff, conditioning maybe is happening, and I got to get to the bottom of this. And I don't think I was ever in the GATE program, but I think I was targeted, So
yes,
about your experience of targeting and the GATE program.
Well, I didn't even put like 2 and 2 together until this year. And I just turned 38. So when I started my YouTube channel, I actually started it 3 years ago, but I started talking about the GATE program about 6 months ago. And basically what pushed me into this whole experience is that in 2023, I was pursuing my other comedy podcasts, and my comedy alter ego is somebody who is trying to be famous for the sake of being famous. And basically I started that whole thing because it was just like a satirical look at like, dang, all these people in the industry just trying to get famous. So there was like this part of me that was just acting it out, kind of like almost not in a way to like, well, maybe in a way to be provocative and just kind of like bring light to the fact that we all want to be famous and we'll just do anything to get ahead. So I would like lean into that character. And I think I attracted some people in doing so because I was always doing skits on my Starletted page, and then like, I'll do anything to be famous, and I'm going to Hollywood, I'm going to be famous, all this stuff. And then I met some people who were in the comedy scene, and the first person I met was a producer, and I saw behind the scenes like how he treated people, and I was also on the receiving end of how he treated people, and it was not good. And it was very much like the Me Too kind of vibe, like, okay, if you don't go on a date with me, or if you don't, it's implied that if you don't hang out with me or be my friend or date me, like you don't get to be on the show. And it's one thing to imply that, but it's another thing to like be so open about it. And I don't know, I never met anyone like that who like, I understand like when somebody's putting out the vibe, and if you're like, not feeling it, like most people can take no for an answer, but like this person individually or in particularly could not. And through him, I met another guy, and they were friends. And like 6 months later, this is where I tell people that, and where I've learned that we have to be careful as empaths and sensitive people, and people who may have an interest in the new age, because a lot of people can use that lingo. So part of the reason I got hooked up, or that I got kind of sideswept into working with these people, is they were using a lot of new age kind of lingo. Like, I've been working on myself, I'm meditating, it's like really helping, I'm starting to work crystals. So I was more like, oh, cool, like I'm helping them. And then I had like the spiritual ego about it too. And that's something I had to learn to also let go of, is being too attached to like this idea of trying to help other people. You know what I mean? Like I was very much in the either I'm the victim or like I'm somebody's savior mentality. But anyways, I met them, and then we did the whole dance of doing podcasts and starting a show together. And then eventually went so far to, they had me be the co-president of a egalitarian organization that was supposed to be about helping other people and like putting on shows for artists and musicians and comedians, bringing it all together with the goal of starting like a eco village. And, you know, it all sounds so amazing, but what I realized working in the industry is like, they just know how to say that, but like behind the scenes, I saw a lot of corruption. I saw like laundering money and stealing money from people. I saw talking mad crap about the comedians and people they're supposed to be helping, and then not living up to the values they were trying to teach to the community, which rubbed me the wrong way. So I experienced, after I left, there was blackmail and there were threats, and there were people sent after me after I left the comedy show. And then there was black magic and witches, which was really scary because I've always been into the idea of manifestation. But I think I learned during this experience, there's like a difference between, you know, me writing in my journal and burning my fears on a piece of paper during the full moon, like, which is, I would say, maybe somebody who's not familiar with the occult or witchcraft, like, you know, it's like the white girl witches. We're just like, we don't know much about the history. And it's just kind of like, oh, it's trendy to like manifest something, or it's trendy to like wear crystals. But then there's also people who really take this craft seriously, and they're using like, you know, blood and hair and DNA and stuff. And then you're starting to get real experience with like feeling demonic entities and the presence of that. And somebody in one of our shows, one of the reasons I stopped working with them is they called one of our shows a ritual. And I was confused at the time because I was kind of under the influence of substances myself, and just kind of like going along with, I think, a trap that a lot of comedians and musicians get in, where it's like, oh, it's all fun and games, we're just like drinking to have a good time. It's common for comedians to be on stage with a beer. Same with musicians. We don't really think twice about it. So it's like, we got to be careful about the company we keep, because if we're just kind of going through the motions, like I wasn't really paying attention to the behaviors. It was more about like the sense of belonging, and like a lot of other people like, oh, we're just getting the stage time. But when they called it a ritual, it started to put like red flags out there. And then I experienced a lot of internal back and forth. Like, am I making this up? Is it real? Am I in control of my reality? Is something else more powerful than me? Are demons real? Or am I just too stoned on Mary Jane to like be thinking rationally? So there was definitely like a long period of like sitting with myself and doing a lot of shadow work during that period to like really come to see what was going on, and then learn how to properly protect myself. And I will say that the gang stalking, like from that particular group, whoever they were, I don't know if they were in a cult. They definitely had a lot of like, it seems like they're trying to build a cult, and there's definitely like a lot of like religious programming and conspiracy stuff that they talked about. And then there was like, I don't know, at least 5 of them that were involved in the same group. So I don't know if they were like doing rituals or together. I don't know. There's a lot of questions I still have, but it mirrored a lot of the stuff that I was seeing on TV in Hollywood. And then the way Gate ties back into it, or maybe doesn't. After I left that, I spent about a year in hiding, and then I saw the Gate videos online. I started having my own memories with Gate, and it's like, oh, I was in this gifted program. I didn't think anything twice about it. I hadn't thought twice about it. But then when I started digging into what the GATE program was about, research, and then I stumbled upon Monarch programming literature. It was a book that came out in the 90s. And actually I read it right as I was in the midst of the gang stalking, like conspiracy, witchcraft thing. And I realized that the people I was working with, like, they kept pushing marijuana onto me, and they were kind of mirroring all of these programming tactics. So I don't know if it was a subconscious thing, and that's just like cycles of pain and trauma passed down generation to generation that has created this mass mind control. So maybe they weren't specifically programmers, but then there's always been the possibility in my mind, well, like, you know, who told me, I don't know, probably shouldn't say what they told me, but they implied that they had family that was involved with something. So it also makes me wonder, like, are they involved with some kind of like society where they've been conditioned and I'm targeted? Because when I go back and look at the research from Monarch programming, which is an offset of MK Ultra, and then targeting of bloodlines, when you look back at the history of the GATE program, they were targeting bloodlines, and early childhood trauma was a thing, early childhood surgery. And when I started digging into all this stuff, I was like, oh my God, check. So then you ask yourself the question, am I being targeted, or is this just mass mind control that's happening? And what I'm finding, the longer I've had my channel up and the more people that share, is that even if people weren't gifted and talented, there's a lot of people on this planet who are waking up and they're becoming conscious to these mind control patterns and systems on the planet. And I think this generation of people, especially those of us born in the 80s and 90s, and then even 2000s and after that, there just seem to be of a different, I don't know if it's a vibration. I don't know if the vaccines in the 80s and 90s like did something to our DNA and caused a lot of neurodivergence, or if this is a result of the mind control, or like what is going on. But I think a lot of us are more sensitive to this stuff. So I think a lot of us can actually relate to these patterns more so than not, which is kind of scary in a lot of ways, but maybe it's a good thing because more and more people are seeing like the corruption and the pyramid schemes, essentially the big pyramid scheme that seems to run this entire world. So there's hopes that people are waking up to the power systems. And yeah.
What you were describing was reminding me of how I actually got on drugs. I actually had a guy that I played in a band with. He came up with a guitar pick with Coke on the end of it, and he shoved it up my nose. And as I was pulling away, like he had it right here. So there was no way I couldn't breathe it in, just trying to get like gasping to get away. Right. And that was how I got hooked on drugs for a long time as a teenager. And his parents were in the secret societies around here. There's a lot of people in my bloodline that are popular, and I don't want anything to do with any of them. And I think my side of the family always kinds of, they get buried in a lot of ways because we don't play along with the society stuff, you know, and I couldn't care less about that. But I know I was targeted by several people throughout my life. Back to the manager that I had when I was in Nashville, because she never did anything for me. She just wanted to bring up weird sex stuff all the time, or try to like walk in while I was in the shower or something, or wait till I was laying down drunk and like try to pull at my nuts or something. I don't know. So there's a lot of people out there that'll go to extraordinary lengths to mess with you. And it's a big part of that system. I wonder why though, like our generation, our specific generation, the 87 Club, we seem to have better recall and a better grip on what's actually going on around us. And I think it has a lot to do with like the harmonic convergence and stuff that happened during that time period energetically. Our spirits just came in different, and we were ready to be annoying about what's going on out there. So I think there's a lot of people that I've heard in our same age group that we know that we're supposed to shake stuff up, and we're just unafraid about it, you know?
Yes, facts. I love that. Absolutely love that. You just said that. And I think about the astrology too, and the Pluto and Scorpio generation. And Pluto is the planet of change. It's the death and rebirth, the transformation, the underworld, the shadow work. So like not being afraid to talk about taboo subjects, not to mention our generation, probably more than most generations. Well, maybe I don't know if we were the start of this hookup culture and all that. I'm sure a lot of it was going on in the 60s and 70s, but I don't know. It just seems like the majority of people I probably know. And again, I don't know if this is because I'm single and I've been in the creative world. So I think the creative world tends to attract more transient people and people who are more interested in like casual flings and stuff. But I also think there's so many of us who suffer from some kind of sex trauma when we are kids. And when you're that young and you have those kind of experiences happen, you're often in some ways dissociating from the event. So if your mind is in a different brainwave state as these experiences are happening, affects your ability to form long-term memories. So a lot of times for people, it only comes out in like a blackout, or you remember like fragments of what happened. And I think that when people are carrying around that kind of unconscious trauma, we unknowingly project it on each other. And I think our generation has been like a really, crazy example of that. And I can only speak for myself personally, but when I went to the 12-step meetings, when I was getting sober, literally everyone I met, like guys and girls, I don't know if I met anyone who didn't have some kind of sex trauma as a child. So whether that was, I don't know if that was like family stuff. I don't know, it's not like we really went into details, but I was just kind of shocked at how that kind of trauma from an early age can affect your relationships as an adult. For men, I noticed a lot of men who had that kind of trauma, like it made them question their sexuality, which they would often drink over. And women, it makes them objectify themselves. And then you look at all the OnlyFans stuff and like sex workers in our society and how we've kind of like started to celebrate it. But then at the end of the day, it's like, I understand why people get in that trap, because there's the illusion of it comes with freedom, and now we can be empowered and we can like, get paid for, stuff we've been giving away for free and blah, blah, blah. I don't need no man, whatever. But at the end of the day, my experience has been, whether that's through observation or just, objectifying myself when I was sick, like it kills your soul and takes so much from you. And until we really get to the bottom of these habits and this trauma that we've experienced, it's really hard to overcome those patterns and to even notice that it's going on. Plus you have the fact that it can be painful when it's coming out, and people may never end up looking at that, and they just may unconsciously act out those behaviors throughout their whole life, never knowing, any better. And then just keep asking themselves, like, why do I keep attracting these people? Well, it's like, I learned it all comes back to us, and like, as dark, like what are we willing to shine a light on in our past, in our own psyche? And then that can give us, that's for me been the road to freedom, to overcoming a lot of this stuff and like not participating in those same habits and that behavior anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's listening and they feel like they were a part of either the GATE program or some kind of Monarch programming or something like that, how do they go about just taking back their mind and like doing what we obviously did?
Well, I think the most important thing, the thing that was most helpful for me, it was joining a 12-step group. And I understand that that won't be the path for everybody, but for anyone that's listening that has struggled with any kind of addiction, whether your addiction is drinking, whether it is marijuana or narcotics, or if your addiction is being addicted to those who partake in drugs or alcohol, they have programs for that, like Al-Anon. Then when I was in 12-step recovery and I started to eliminate those substances from my life, I also hopped around and did Codependence Anonymous, and I did Al-Anon Anonymous, and I did a couple sex addicts Anonymous also, just because I wanted to get to the bottom of like, why do I have this misery in my soul? So it's like, I think the first step for me or anyone listening who can relate to this idea that they're addicted to substances, or like I said, people that consume or people that are addicted to substances. So like being addicted to this idea that you're going to save someone and putting yourself in situations where they're taking so much from you because you're sacrificing yourself in order to like get them to stop or save their life or whatever. Like all of that falls under the same category of addiction. So even though it looks different, so I would start at a 12-step program where you can find mentorship. You find other people who have been through the same thing that you have. You get comfortable having real conversations and meetings with other people who are interested in recovery, because there's nothing worse than when you're trying to make changes in your life. Like I didn't like the idea of going to a meeting because I thought it was better than that. But I tried quitting drinking on my own. And for the most part, like I could stay stopped for like a month at a time. So it wasn't like, I wasn't like a crazy alcoholic or anything like that. It was more like, I don't like the social effects or the mental or the physical or emotional effects it's having on me. And trying to do that on my own wasn't helpful, especially because everyone around me, like you can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. So I'm trying to hang out with all my friends who refuse to look at their own drinking problems. And no one in your life, like if you're trying to quit an unhealthy behavior or pattern and somebody's encouraging you to drink still or to partake in that behavior and like minimizing how you feel about it, or like telling you, hey, it's not a big deal, just have one drink isn't going to kill you. Like those are not your people, and they're not there for your highest good. They, if anything, they want to keep you at their level of consciousness so they don't have to shine a light on what's going on with them. So I experienced that. And then when I was finally ready to say like, okay, God, universe, whatever's out there, my misery is outweighing my, fear of stepping outside of my comfort zone and my pride, which was keeping me from going to seek help. So once I was able to like humble myself and be like, I am where I am, like recovery is more important than like trying to unalive myself because I'm so miserable trying to seek relief from all these people, places, and things. So once I was able to like humble myself and start recovery groups, I learned how to communicate with people and have real vulnerable conversations. I heard other people share their stories, experience strength and hope. I quit the substances, which gave me mental clarity. And then the most important thing, if you are never going to go to a recovery meeting or anything like that, the one thing that I took out of meetings that was so important and so helpful that I've adopted and I've put on my channel in my description for people to use for free, because I don't charge for these tools. It's a fear inventory and belief exploration worksheet plus a 21-day habit tracker. And what that has done for me and what I hope it will do for other people, it gives you a space for your trauma to live on paper so you can get it out of your head and just dump it. So that's step one. But step two is, there's space to write at least 20 names. So to be able to write down your resentments and some of the scenarios that you didn't like, so you're mad at certain people in your life, but the process of writing an inventory is taking the other person out of it entirely and then bringing it back to yourself and asking yourself if I'm the only one in this situation, like taking their part out entirely, like where was I selfish and self-seeking in this relationship? Where was I afraid? Where did I lie to them or lie to myself that helped create and contribute to these outcomes, which are ultimately making me upset? And ultimately, when we dig deep enough, it all boils down to a fear or belief that we have about a person, place, or thing and the way the world is. And if we can rewrite those beliefs to a positive expectation or a positive, the opposite of fear. And then if we do that for enough people, say you do it for 5 people, good, you get some relief. Say you do it for 10 or 20 people, you're going to get a lot of relief. You're going to see all those patterns on a piece of paper and you're going to be able to say, okay, I see not only am I the common denominator, but I'm starting to get a list of my beliefs and I can see how they're shaping my life. I can see that my fear of being alone is driving all of my decisions. I can see that my fear of not being good enough is literally sending out a light signal to attract every man who's going to prove that to me that I'm not good enough because I'm sending out that signal to attract these people. So once we can take radical responsibility for like why we're attracting these experiences and what beliefs are inside of us that make us continue to act this way, that's when the shift will happen. And I've also been able to find relief in tools like astrology and human design. And I think those tools can appeal to people who are more like esoteric and woo-woo and, star seeds, empath kind of people who are, have a sense that there's something else out there in the cosmos that is guiding our life. So I like astrology because it just reframes my experiences in a fun way, in a language that I can understand. I think some people may prefer psychology and like cold, hard facts and logic, but I'm creative. So I like the esoteric explanations. I like to know about the energy of a planet and how the moon rules my emotions and how Saturn is about lessons. And I like knowing that I can look at my astrology chart and there's like a destiny laid out for me, but I'm still in control of that destiny and how it plays out. So even if I have themes I want to explore in this lifetime, I can decide, am I going to act on like the highest polarity of those themes, or am I going to experience the lowest polarity of those lessons? And I've experienced both, but I will tell anyone listening that the second I really started taking radical responsibility for my life, I went from experiencing all the power struggles of Scorpio, all the insecurity of Libra and the superficiality that Libras can get into, and the indulgence that Sagittarians can get into, to experiencing the highest level of those things. So like Libra in its highest expression is like justice and kindness and compromise and harmony and balance and beauty. And Scorpio in its highest expression is transformation, not being afraid to talk about the taboo in order to transform the people around them. And then Sagittarius and its highest expression is to be a teacher, to be a guide, to come up with your own philosophies and your beliefs about life. So rather than being the know-it-all, understanding that like everybody, has a piece of the puzzle. So we should be more open-minded and accept the fact that we all have our own version of truth. So I think astrology kind of helped me flatten the ego a little bit and just realize where I could be harsh around the edges or whatever, and versus what are the highest expressions that I should be working towards. And if I work towards those highest expressions of my own character, then I start to experience reality in a way that's way more positive, way more enjoyable, way more uplifting.
Well, I have about 2 questions for you.
Yes.
The first one is, on your channel, you connect the GATE program, the Monarch programming, and Hollywood conditioning together. So just to give us a taste, what is the thread, I guess, that commonly ties these systems together?
Well, Monarch programming, according to the literature I found that I talk about on my channel all the time, it was from this book called The Illuminati Formula, Used to Create an Undetectable Total Mind-Controlled Slave by Cisco Wheeler and Fritz Springmeier. And that book talks about how conditioning and mind control starts at the very beginning, like before you even exit the womb. So, and it's often, people are often targeted based on the bloodline. So they're either part of one of the 13 bloodlines, or they, some sources were saying it's like blonde hair, blue eyed, but I know that's not limited to that because there's so many people who have been targeted who aren't just the blonde hair, blue eyed, but there are some resources out there on Monarch that talk about how it's the German Nazi scientists and they were trying to continue Hitler's whole thing, like the ideal race or whatever he was, Hitler was, and his crazy ideologies were. So there's some talks about how their specific people are targeted based on that. I've also heard that redheads might be targeted because of their connection potentially to the Nephilim or like the giants or something. And it all seems to go back to religious programming at the end of the day. So these organizations that are allegedly doing the programming tend to be from these really religious like upbringings and orders. And I don't know if it has to do with aliens or reptilians. I think I've read some literature that think that maybe it has to do with like reptilians and, things not of this world, but they also talk about demon programming. And the whole idea behind Monarch is to split the identity at birth through trauma. And the crazy thing about this, like I'll get into the gate connection in a second, but like, I think there's more people that have birth trauma than don't have it, because premature births, when you're in the NICU as a child, when you're born with the umbilical cord around your neck, when you are born into a sterile environment of a hospital and they're chopping off your umbilical cord, and for a man snipping off your, then that's very traumatic for an infant. So they're kind of like doing this seemingly on a mass scale. And then at 18 months, the programming begins. But I think gate kids were targeted because in that book, when they talk about programming, they talk about IQs of 130 or higher. So basically saying that if you had a IQ of 130 or higher, program would work on those people, but it doesn't tend to work on people with lower IQs than that. And then the interesting connection between GATE is that in order to be in the gifted program, the most common IQ I hear from people in GATE was 140 IQ. So it's people with the high intelligence, which mirrors how they picked out Monarch programming slaves. And then just based on testimonies from my channel, a lot of people have bloodlines connected to like these big names in history, or like Masons or military or religious, people in their lineage. So they feel targeted from that. And not only that, but when they did the GATE, the gifted and talented education curriculum, at least my own elementary school, and I think this may have been different in every school all over the world, or actually literally all over the world, because I get people from Australia and England who talk on my channel too, but about the GATE program. But I think the GATE kids were targeted because in order to be a part of GATE, they were looking for kids who were the creators instead of the copiers. So they found that the GATE kids were starting the trends. They were already natural leaders. But so if you think about programming and the purpose behind programming, then it's like, well, you're not going to want to, it's doesn't make sense to program a copier because they're just going to copy somebody else. You got to go to the source, the people who are going to be influential. Let's get these kids, let's drill our ideology into them. And not to mention, Monarch programming also had, according to this book, at 18 months old, they did personality tests on the children, and they would decide whether they would funnel them into military, into intelligence, into entertainment industry. So again, this is all just alleged. So I always tell people, take it with a grain of salt. This book came out in the 90s. There's a lot of controversy about it. And the guy, Fritz Springmeier, got in trouble for assault or robbery, armed robbery or something. So was he set up because he was telling truth and they didn't like it? Or was he a bad guy? I don't know. But it just is very odd to me how Gate and Monarch have such a connection with that. And then I literally just made a video about that too today. I just posted it on my channel a couple hours before we connected. So that's the connection I see between Gate and Monarch. And what was the third thing? Were we tying it into the third thing? I forget.
Yeah, we were tying it into the Hollywood conditioning. Oh,
yes. Okay. So Hollywood conditioning, part of one of the personality tests and areas where they would funnel the children into, just because Gate children, or typically people with higher intelligence or creativity, are naturally more influential, and some of them were funneled into Hollywood. So if you look at what's going on in Hollywood, like why do they invest so much in Hollywood? Why is the government and the Defense Department in bed with Hollywood? Why does every big movie that comes out about where the military is even mentioned, they've got a staff of people on set who are writing how they're allowed to, portray our military, so that they don't leak information that they shouldn't, but also so it doesn't change, so it controls the image that we see. So when we see artists like Katy Perry, like Lady Gaga, like Sabrina Carpenter, Britney Spears, all these big name celebrities that were watching this stuff in Hollywood, and we're like, why do they all look like clones? Like, what's going on? I mean, even like, not throwing out accusations, but I just think it's so interesting to know all this stuff about Monarch and how it allegedly works. But then to see Katy Perry, who is rumored to be, one of the biggest industry puppets, because it's like people say, you don't just get that level of famous overnight. And then she literally jokes. I don't know if she's joking or a lot of people take her seriously when she says like she sold her soul. She used to be gospel, but now she sold her soul to be famous. And there's videos of her like crying when she cut her hair because she didn't want to be Katy Perry anymore. So I can only imagine how that might feel. Because even in my brief experience with my local producers, I had somebody who was acting as like a handler or a manager in my life. And I literally felt the same way that she did. And I'm a nobody. So I can only imagine what it's like when people have millions and billions of dollars invested in you. And then now she's dating what's his name? Justin Trudeau. Oh, I just lost my light. So I got to go fix it in a minute. But the Prime Minister of Canada, and they've got Katy Perry, dating him. And then you've got, this dates back to the Marilyn Monroe days and, John JFK and his assassination, and her getting too close to people and knowing too much about the alien disclosure. And then her supposedly being a honeypot for the intelligence agencies. So we can start to see how this has been a long-standing pattern in Hollywood. And again, it goes back to targeting those with either a lot of creative abilities, psychic sensitivity, or a high intelligence and high IQ, because those people can be your blank slate and they can be programmed to have a certain ideology set. Or I've done other videos about honeypots, and I noticed that when people have certain personality traits, I noticed that a lot of so-called honeypots, like the famous ones, have a lot of Scorpio, Libra, Sagittarius energy, which I think is so interesting, because all those signs astrologically, it's like they all have to do with people and building relationships. And Sagittarius is about belief systems and ideologies. So it's just kind of like, you can see how they're even targeting somebody's personality and why they might, certain signs may end up in the entertainment industry more.
Yeah, I definitely get it. But the one thing I would say is that it really comes down to personal choice. The choices that you make really determine how sucked in you're going to get to this whole thing. I like to call it the cult of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, honestly. And they dangle that carrot on the string in front of you and they're like, hey, look over here. we can, in my instance, it was like, hey, we will invest in whatever it is that you're doing because we love your creative potential, you know? And like you were saying, I was never a copier. I was always the leader and the creator. And to this day, I don't really resonate with watching TV or anything like that. It's not for me. I've always been like, I'd rather sit around and make stuff or talk to animals and all those other things that, you know, you really get told you're crazy if you want to isolate, you know, and be an animal lover. So I don't know.
You and me both. I just lost my light. I'm going to go turn on my light real quick. 1 second. Yes, I feel that. And I'm the same way. I think that tends to happen with people who are highly creative and, yeah, you feel like a loner or I don't know if outcast is the right word, but I definitely relate to that a lot. Like being able to entertain myself. I don't really like TV, but I will, watch it with friends every so often or to wind down. Like my mom loves TV. So I usually watch a show with her at night to just kind of wind down. But the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, if I was living alone, I wouldn't be doing this. But, I try to have a balance of like still doing human things, but also being aware of like, what are you absorbing? And there's definitely certain shows that I don't want to watch because I don't want to absorb like the programming behind it. But then there's also stuff that inspires me and that, I also have to keep reminding myself that not everything is terrible, Alex. Like you're always trying to, always see the pattern in everything. So I can see how there's a fine line between paranoia and, awareness. So I'm trying to, I guess, walk that balance every day, just like be mindful of what I'm consuming. And then also remembering at the end of the day, ultimately, I'm the one who decides like what kind of value am I going to get from something. And I do like to believe that everything, that spirit puts in front of us, we can take the good, we can take the bad, it is whatever we make of it. So, yeah. So I think that's awesome. I love that you're creating too. And like you have a whole community, you have such cool guests on your podcast too. I can see that. And then so cool that you're also into music. And I have to ask, when is your birthday? If you want to share.
August 27th, 1987.
Oh, I love that. Nice. So Virgo. Awesome. And Virgo, all right, how cool is this? Because when you're at a certain point in our life, like we'll spend about 30 years in the same progressed sign. So at a certain point, you'll progress into a Libra sign. And so it's interesting to see like what you're doing now. Cause if you're my age, that makes you 37, 38 too, right? Or 37? 38. Okay. So 38 as well. I wonder, I'd have to like look at your chart, but I would imagine you're crossed over into the Libra progressed sun phase, which is all about relationships.
I don't get along with Libras, so I hope not.
I'm a Libra.
Yeah. Oh, damn.
No, it's okay. I understand. But that's interesting. It's all good. It's all good. Just remember that in our astrology makeups, we are all a little bit of every sign. I think a lot of people over-identify with their sun signs, but I think when you really dig into astrology, you see like there's so much more to it. You have a sun sign, you have a moon sign, you have a rising sign, you have a Venus sign, a Mars sign, a Jupiter sign. So there's like 12 different signs that make up your whole psyche. So some people might have like 5 of their planets in Libra, so they could be really strong Libra. But for the most part, like most of your average birth charts that we're going to see are going to have like your planets spread out. And if you do have a stellium, which is when you have like 5 planets in the same house or whatever, it's called a stellium. And it just means that particular area of your life is more activated. So you experience more themes from that area. So yeah. And then also what I realized for me, I have a North Node in Aries, and I used to like hate Aries people because back in the day, like when I was still developing my personality, like I wasn't comfortable with that part of me that was like comfortable with asserting myself. And now it's funny because I really resonate with Aries people. And I think that's because I've been on so many soul lessons that have taught me how to be assertive, how to be the leader. So it was like when I was younger, I feared what I didn't know how to embody yet. Not saying that that's you, but it's just one way to look at it, like why we might not get along with certain signs. Like maybe that sign more than anything has something to teach us. And I used to be the same way with Capricorn. Like an example in my own chart is I would always attract Capricorns. And I'm like, they're so like, they were always so critical of me, but I have a 5-planet stellium in Capricorn. So it was like, they were kind of putting the training wheels on to like, you know, build me up into what I was embodying, or what I was supposed to learn how to be embodying is like Saturn themes of ambition and like the positive traits of Capricorn. So I just think it's also interesting, like who the universe keeps putting up with us. It's like, what are you trying to teach me?
I don't think you're trying to teach me anything except that Libras are stubborn.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe she had some Scorpio in her. Or they. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyways, thanks for being on the Boundless Authenticity podcast.
You're welcome.
Tell everyone where they can find you.
I'm on YouTube at Statements by Alex, and I'm also on TikTok and Instagram at Statements by Alex. And you can also visit my link tree at Statements by Alex. So all my info to like work together or do readings or download any healing tools can all be found on YouTube in my description, or TikTok or Instagram also in my description. But thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed this. We enjoyed this interaction immensely. As Abraham Hicks would say.
All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good.
You're listening to the Boundless Authenticity podcast, where we discuss everything related to the evolution of human consciousness.
At the very least, people need to understand that the United States builds bunkers, which are basically cities underground, every 3 months.
Basically, when you dream, you tap into your subconscious. It is your nocturnal intuition, your creativity and imagination unchained from conscious reason, ego and logic.
They're biologically alive, but they have no soul. They have AI consciousness. They can alter your conscious of the brain to get the brain.
We live in a multidimensional reality. Whether it comes through esoteric information in the spiritual realms, or the UFO people, or experiencers, or mainstream through quantum physics and through mainstream science now realizing that parallel dimensions probably exist.
We're all spiritual beings. We're all having these human experiences. We've heard that phrase over and over and over. But what does that really mean? You know, all the big questions of life, we have these answers inside of our souls.
We're ultimately studying the nature of what it is to be human, good and evil, our psychology, how we think, and our health. That's why I love Bruce Lee's great quote, all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge.
The Boundless Authenticity podcast.